Do you want to finally understand the root cause of your digestive issues, perhaps chronic inflammation or autoimmune disease, maybe even anxiety or depression? Well, if so, please join me in diving into why a stool test can be so valuable and helping you understand the why behind why you're not feeling so well. Hi, my name is Dr. Ariane Missimer. I'm a functional medicine practitioner, doctor of physical therapy, registered dietitian, and owner of the Movement Paradigm Integrative Health Center. And one of my favorite things to do is stool analysis. Yes, I know that sounds crazy, but I have done hundreds of stool analysis at this point, and by far, it is the one test that continues to amaze me every time and provide excellent results when you treat it systematically. You might be thinking, why on earth would I do a stool test? Well, if you are like most of my patients, you are experiencing some kind of chronic health condition. Maybe that's as simple as dry, itchy skin or swelling in your hands or arthritis, but maybe it's also chronic digestive issues. Your bowels are very irregular, or you have an autoimmune disease, or you have anxiety or depression. And the stool test is a great avenue to be able to understand in depth what is happening in your microbiome that is directly connected to your brain through the gut-brain axis, our bidirectional two-way communication. So when we can begin to look at exactly what's happening, which I will get into detail about, we can have a very systematic approach to addressing your root causes of why some things might be happening for you. So what are we looking for on a stool test? So the first thing that's really important is that we always want to pair any testing, any special testing or labs with your clinical presentation. So it really is important to have a great understanding of what you're experiencing day to day, moment to moment, and how these things are correlating with your stool test. Like I said, we want to do that with every clinical lab value. Now, when we're looking at this, we are first looking at pathogens. So we might have something like C. diff or E. coli or a parasite like Giardia. All of these things could pop up. It doesn't necessarily mean that you had E. coli yesterday, but if the numbers are elevated and they're out of range, then that could mean that you have a chronic colonization for it. So if you were exposed to it, you could actually get it very easily. If there was something like Giardia, which is a parasite that can destroy the microvilli of the intestine like celiac can, that is really high priority. That's something that would need to be treated. Next, we look at H. pylori. So H. pylori is an infection that occurs in the stomach. It is a bacterial infection. It is a gram-negative bacteria, and this is present in 50% of the population. So literally 1 in 2 stool tests I see someone has H. pylori. Normally, if they have it, then their significant other should also be tested and or treated for that because it is highly transmissible. So that is something that can cause burping, that can cause bloating, that can cause nausea. It can cause feelings of fullness or hunger. You're not really sure how that feels day to day. Then we look at your commensal bacteria. So we often hear about this as your beneficial bacteria. So in this case, we can get a really nice profile of what is happening. Now, we often would think, well, we want a lot of our really our good bacteria, but actually we want it in a healthy range. We don't want them too low. We don't want them too high because either one of those extremes can cause issues. Then we look at the opportunistic bacteria. So this is bacteria that can be problematic and it can be linked to inflammation and autoimmune disease. So it can also be linked to things like histamine intolerance. So specific bacteria can produce more histamines. They can also be mast cell activating, which can therefore release more histamine. So we can start to see some patterns of what's going on as it relates to dysbiosis, so an imbalance of bacteria. We can also see small intestine patterns. So when we're referring to the stool test, we're looking at the large intestine, but we can see patterns that may present as small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which can warrant either further testing or monitoring of diet and so on. We can also see if there's a yeast overgrowth. So some signs of that may be things like you have a chronic fungus in your toenail that's not resolving. Maybe you have a history of vaginal yeast infections. Maybe you have thrush in your mouth. So there can be really obvious things. And then there's, of course, not so obvious things. Some people can present with chronic joint pain and inflammation. We can also see other parasites that may be present. And then the last segment of the stool test is where we can really look at your overall intestinal health. This is really, really valuable because we can look to see how you're digesting food. So your steatocrit is a measure of fat. Is the fat in the stool high, which means that you're having a malabsorption of fat? Is your pancreatic elastase within a healthy range? Is it too low, which would mean you have low pancreatic elastase, i.e. enzymes, to break down your food. This is going to correlate when you start to see a lot of imbalance with bacteria. So things that are too high, things that are too low. And you can also, this is also a really easy fix, which could be pancreatic enzyme supplementation, bile supplementation, working on natural digestive practices like chewing your food, breathing before eating. Then you can start to look a little bit more in depth too about your immune system of your gut. So the secretory IgA. So sometimes that can be really high, sometimes that could be really low. And we, of course, want it in a really healthy balance. You can see if there's antibodies to gluten. So is your body having a reaction to gluten? And then sometimes if we see that, we can also see that maybe some of the inflammatory markers are elevated. So how do you go about addressing all of that? And I see really complicated cases and very complicated stool tests. And what I love about the stool test so much is that you can prioritize and you can make a very systematic approach to it. And what I found works really, really well for my patients, because a lot of times they're coming either from other providers where they're taking tons and tons and tons of supplements and they're really overwhelmed by everything, or they don't want to take that much, or they're just overwhelmed in general with the process. And so what I really like to do is be able to look at the stool test, prioritize, what is a pathogen, what is an infection, what needs to be treated right away, and break it up into phases for each patient. So for one patient, it might be one, I'd call it gut healing phase 1 or phase 2. For another patient, it might be 4. For another patient, it might be 3. So it could just really depend on how complicated your case is, how many supplements you're able to take or not able to take. I really tried to do 1 to 2 at a time that might be related to a specific treatment. And that really works well emotionally, mentally, and physically for most patients. So I think the great thing about it is that it's objective data and you can really organize it in a fashion to be able to improve your symptoms slowly over time. And I could give you countless stories of how that has happened with patients, and it is really one of the most profound tests that you can do to optimize your health. Personally, I love doing it as a preventative measure. So coming from gut issues after cancer, I really began to dive into stool testing very regularly to keep making sure that I'm addressing things if they come up, and they can, right? So that's what happens with our world and our environment. But if you found this helpful, please give it a like, give it a share. Of course, share it with a friend that it might be helpful for. If you need help on your journey, please reach out. We would love to do a discovery session with you and see how we may be able to help you on your journey with whatever you're dealing with. And if you'd like some more information, you can check out our website. You can also check out our app, The Movement Paradigm, on Apple and Google. And we have lots of different programs, challenges, lots of information for you to continue your health journey. As always, thank you.